Hello, Gloria. Welcome to the Conquering Everest podcast.
Oh, hello, Brian, and thank you so much for having me on today. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you. I can't wait to dive into your story. But let's go ahead and take just a moment, if you'd like to, in your words, introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I am Gloria Grace Rand, and I have been in business for over 10 years, helping entrepreneurs. Specifically, they hire me to create an online message that generates consistent leads and sales because so many don't know how to communicate authentically. So I really help them actually appreciate their unique value so that they can have more impact and influence and income. The bottom line is always nice. And in fact, that is the bottom line. We attract ideal clients to their business with messages from the heart. And that's, like I say, I've been doing this SEO copywriting work now for over 10 years, and I'm moving into more coaching because part of the reason I have discovered in working with clients over the years is why they have trouble communicating sometimes is because they aren't really talking from the heart. They are maybe trying to live up to somebody else's expectations, and they're not really being true to who they are. And I've come a long way in discovering that for myself, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little while. And that's why I'm really passionate about helping them as well. So that's why I offer coaching in addition to the actual writing of the messaging, which I still love to do.
Yeah, that's great. And as I've read your story and got to know a little bit about you, communication, that outwardness of it wasn't always the case. You've had to develop yourself over the years. Let's kind of go back and let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about your story, where it began for you. As a child growing up, what was that? What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, it was. There were some challenges. There were some, I think, good spots, in actually relation to my older brother and sister. I think they actually even had it worse than I did. That there's 10 years difference between my sister, and my brother was 14 years older than me. But I grew up in a household with, unfortunately, alcoholism was a big problem. My dad was an alcoholic. And then my mom, in trying to deal with that, didn't always deal with it very well, frankly. And she could be abusive, mostly verbal abuse, but I did get a black eye one time because I didn't want to eat my peas and I threw them out, and she caught me. As a child of depression, she didn't like seeing food go to waste, and I think that was really what kind of brought that out for her. But so yeah, it was a little. Things were tense, shall we say, in the household. Not always knowing how, what kind of shape my dad was going to be in, maybe when he came home from work, and then how my mom would react to that. And so, a lot of stress, a lot of fear. And as I said, there was a big gap between my siblings and I. So they essentially both were out of the house by the time I was 7. And so I was an only child. And in some respects, things did get better at times, but not always. Not always. Still had to deal with a lot of that stuff.
And your father was more of the, and I'm going off of memory, so who knows what you're going to get from my memory. But your father, if I remember right, he was pretty compassionate. He was kind of the one that would come home, be lighthearted with you, and then your mom was more of like the
Actually, no, you know what? Actually, I mean, I have some good memories of my dad. I mean, he did help me out a lot. I mean, he was the one who taught me how to ride a bike. He loved to play golf, when he was, feeling better and not in the throes of alcoholism. And he actually had me drive a golf cart around from time to time. My mom was very compassionate and very loving to me. And that's what makes it hard, because then there were times where she would just lash out and could, lose her temper at the drop of a hat, and over, things seemingly that I wouldn't think would be a big deal, but she would. And she was also very impatient, and could get easily nervous. And she suffered from depression as well, because I know she was involved in a program that was called Recovery.
Okay.
And I know, in fact, even when I was really little, I know she was involved in that. And so, it's tough, because it's on one hand, she could be, really fun, and she loved to sing, and that helped, kind of foster a love of singing in me. She loved to read. We would go to the library and bring home books. But then there would be times, and I think it was, my dad was more of the, I wouldn't necessarily strong silent type, but more of the silent type, because I think, because my mom was so vocal, and so he would retreat into his shell, and
Mm.
wouldn't he'd sit down in front of the TV and watch TV for hours, and and then of course he'd fall asleep, and I'd change the channel and be like, "No, I'm watching that," as all parents would do.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's yeah, and it's an interesting relationship they even had, and then as a family dynamic, it was challenging as well.
And for you, as a kid growing up in the midst of all this, what did it do to you? Your personality, your confidence. What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, my my sister remarked, years later, that I was a scaredy cat, and I was easily bullied and picked on, and in fact, I was actually journaling about that this morning, even, and thinking about that, because I'm grateful to the bullies in a way now, because they were probably sent to me as a way to help me to try to learn how to stick up for myself. But because of the environment I grew up in, that was a bit too hard, I guess, unless I wasn't ready for that lesson. I wasn't ready to stick up for myself. And I was an easy target. And, I remember I would even, and this was even in junior high, we had to wait for the bus to go to school, and it was wintertime. I grew up in Michigan, and the guys would snatch my hat off my head and then throw it around, and I'm trying to get it back. And um, so, yeah, I even though there was part of me that wanted to be seen. In fact, my mom actually did get me dance lessons, and I loved ballet and tap and jazz and being on stage. I loved that. And that was, I don't know if you ever saw A Chorus Line, but
Mhm.
there's like one song in there that I resonated so much with, because it was like, at the ballet, I was happy. And that was my escape, and that's where I could go, where I didn't have to worry about parents, and I could just have fun. But otherwise, other times, and like dealing with school and stuff, yeah, I wasn't always the most outgoing person. Didn't have, wasn't the class clown, was not the most popular girl in school. I had a close knit, few friends that I could confide in, because yeah, I was pretty shy.
And it's you said like music and dance was your escape. And it sounds like you had confidence in that space when you could go and be in your world without having to worry about the environment around you. It sounds like you had a lot of confidence. You were able to, let your personality come through.
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely places that I shined, and again, like I say, music was a big part of our family life, and that my dad actually played the organ, and so I learned how to play as well. And then when I got into school, I joined the band. I played the flute and then the saxophone in high school, and I loved expressing myself creatively that way, and that's also writing. I started I started reading at 3. My mom taught me how to read at 3, and then I started writing. Just I think I had a pen pal early on, and then wrote fan letters to John Travolta. He was on Welcome Back, Kotter,
Oh, yeah.
years ago. Um, and then, but yeah, I loved like English class and being able to, write and that was a big part of, yeah, there's this always been this creative side of me that loves to come out. And yeah, and when I can do that, I really, yeah, that's how I come alive. And it is a blessing that I have had that part of my life to be able to fall back on sometimes when I'm, not happy or something. I can, pick up a book and read, or go, play my guitar, or something like that.
So as a kid, when things would get a little, uncomfortable at home, your mom wasn't in the best of mood, your dad was struggling with alcohol. Um, did you escape to the music and the writing and dancing? Like, was that in home? Were you able to escape from the
Um,
environment?
well, yeah, I mean, at home, I'd escape in books. I mean, I
Mm.
was a voracious reader. And so I think, go in my bedroom and just hide out and read, and, until I would hear, Glor, do this, or Glor, go tell your father this, go tell your mother this, kind of thing. Yeah, so I would definitely, that would be that was something that I would love to do, is just go in there and, yeah, or, go play the organ, for a while. I didn't have headphones at the time, so I still would be able to hear what was going on, but I could just, immerse myself. I could spend like a couple hours just going through, I had like these big, they used to call them these big fake books, and they're these really, really thick books that were all the popular songs of the day, and from the 60s and 70s, and I would just play those on the organ and have a lot of fun.
That's cool. Yeah, it's amazing. Our backgrounds are different and our passions are different. But as a kid in the environment I grew up in, I had little things that I could distract myself. I could kind of run off to and be in my own world. And some of those things followed me through high school and then into adulthood. So for
Mhm.
you, how was the as a child you had this area that you could escape to, and then as you got into high school, it sounds like you were playing you were in band and playing instruments, and then how did that progress into college and young adulthood?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I did all of that in high school. I was in the band, and I joined like all the different clubs, because I wanted to be in the yearbook, and so I tried, did things to be active, and and there was I even was in the talent show one time, which I still can't believe that I did. But for some reason, somebody had actually posted a picture on Facebook of me, and I was like, oh my God, I had totally forgotten that I played the guitar and sang "Take Me Home, Country Roads" by John Denver. I think, probably in 10th grade or something, and it was amazing that even though I considered myself shy, I guess given an opportunity to perform, I was going to take advantage of it. Um, and but in my senior year of high school, though, my parents did actually finally split up, and my dad moved out, and so I don't know. I had this crazy idea that I was going to go to Miami, where my grandmother lived, and go to college there, but I don't know, hadn't even talked to a school counselor about this, didn't really make sense. It was really expensive at that time. Um, and so I was suddenly scrambling and trying to figure out where to go to college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I decided to major in business administration because I thought it would help me get a job. I mean,
Mhm.
that's like, totally crazy thinking, not just because I think it was maybe such a shock that I just wasn't really thinking about my future and what I wanted to do. And and then my freshman year of college, in the spring, unfortunately, my older brother passed away suddenly.
Mm.
He died in his sleep, and on Mother's Day of all days.
Wow.
Um, and so that, threw both me and my mom for a loop, because I was commuting to school at that time too, because I didn't, want to leave her anyway. And so I skipped school, and there was a shopping mall across the street from our college, and I'd go to the movie every day. Wound up on academic probation, and when my mom found out, initially she was, really upset, and then when calmed down, I think realized that my brother's death was affecting me as well as her. And so I went to see a counselor, and I wound up taking one of these aptitude tests, and the results recommended that I change my major to mass communications. And so I majored in actually mass communications, radio, TV, film was the sequence of it. And so I got into television production, and which was perfect for me because when I was a little kid, I would like essentially memorize the TV guide. So my parents could ask me, what's on, NBC at 8 o'clock at night, and I could tell you. Thankfully, we only had a few channels in those days.
Right.
But so this just seemed perfect, and that's what I wound up doing. I wound up majoring in that, and I love television production. And I actually, when I graduated from college, my mom was very cool, and she said, "I'm actually divorcing you, Gloria, and you can, I want you to go ahead and move to Florida," because that had been my dream, because we'd lived in Michigan, and I didn't want to deal with snow anymore. And so as soon as I graduated from college, I moved down to Florida, and eventually I wound up getting a job with the public television station there and working for the nightly business report, of all things. So even though I'd given up this major of business administration, I guess God still wanted me to be involved in business. So I wound up working for that show.
So you said your mother divorced you. Do you think she was doing that did she have good intentions behind that because she wanted you to chase your dreams?
Yeah, she did. I mean, she knew that, I really did. She had, in addition to, dealing with depression and stuff, she also had a lot of physical problems, and which I think were caused by, depression and stuff. She had high blood pressure, arthritis and stuff. And so I was always, taking care of her. And I think she realized that, I needed to get off on my own. And even though, selfishly, she would have preferred that I stay with her, she gave me that gift. And that's why and I remember it was like we were waiting for a movie to start. We were in the movie theater, and she turned to me and she's like, Glor, and she did. She said, "I'm divorcing you," because she was in the process of getting a divorce from her husband, my dad. And she's like, "Nope, I'm going to divorce you too, because you need to start your life. You can't keep taking care of me." And that was the best gift she ever gave me.
And I want to go back just a little bit. You said that your brother and sister, there was a big age difference between you all. Did they endure a lot of what you endured as a child? Was there the alcoholism and the depression and everything was there? So it wasn't like something that came out of blue. We got a little technical difficulty here. You're back. Those thunderstorms got you.
Internet being a little wonky. So my sister, my sister said that she and my older brother, they had it even worse, because I think also my mom, she started actually working full time when shortly, I think when I was in preschool, and so she hadn't been working, and so she was just at home being a homemaker and then dealing with my dad. And so that was even more stressful. And so I think also money issues were a big deal. So when she started working full time, that also helped her to be able to kind of get out of the house herself a little bit and give her, a little bit more autonomy. And I think that helped. So that's why I say I did have, all in all, I think a better overall childhood than my siblings.
Now, did you have family in Florida? I mean, what was the the strong pull for you.
Yeah, my grandmother had remarried and she moved down to Coral Gables back when I
Mhm.
was about 7 years old. And so every year we would go down for Christmas vacation and spend that with my grandmother. And so I loved being able to like go to the beach on Christmas Day. That was awesome. I would come back home to Michigan with a tan. And it was like, I mean, I created a version of the song. I used to say, I'm dreaming of a green Christmas where the palm trees sway and children play. And that was my idea. So I was like, yeah, that's where I'm going when I'm done. Who needs shoveling snow and seeing
Right.
if the car's going to start in the cold?
Yeah, I'm a Midwest guy too, and I can't wait till that. I'm going to be moving somewhere warm in the very near future, so I can't wait to
Yeah.
not have to shovel snow. So you went down to Florida. You began working for the Nightly Business Report,
Right.
and so how did things start transitioning for you? Did you do that for a while? Because you talk about getting into your own business.
Business. Yeah,
What
exactly.
was the
Yeah. So
transition for that?
right. So I started working for MBR, and then a couple years later, I met my husband, and we had two wonderful children. And I worked for the Nightly Business Report for a little over 10 years, and then I actually had an opportunity to produce my own business show. It was part of a statewide cable network that was
Mm.
cropping up at the time. And so I moved to Tallahassee for a little while and worked there, but my husband wasn't able to find a job. So I actually went up there with the two kids, partner and a 3-year-old. I gained a huge appreciation for single moms because I was one for about 6, and then moved back and then started just working part-time for a while, and I would be the fill-in producer when the show's main producer would go on vacation. And then my husband got an opportunity to move up to Orlando. He had a job opportunity, and so we moved up here. And so now I had to figure out what I was going to do because I wasn't going to be able to work full time or even part time, frankly, for Nightly Business Report anymore. I did for a little while writing like their calendar, their monthly calendar, just to kind of keep my hand in. But I was soul searching and trying to figure out. I dabbled in writing children's stories for a little while, thinking I could be the next J.K. Rowling, but that didn't pan out too well. But I kept getting this letter in the mail from a company that said, can you actually write a letter like this? And it was from a company called American Writers and Artists Inc. And they taught you how to do copywriting and direct mail advertising. And I said, this actually sounds interesting. And yeah, I could write a letter like that. I've been writing for business news. Why not? And so I signed up for that course, invested in it. And then along the way, then Channel 2, that was the television station that produced NBR, let me know that they were no longer going to need my services to even write their newsletter anymore and
Mm.
for this monthly calendar. So I'm like, well, I guess this is a sign that I'm going to do this business. I'm actually
Right.
going to go dive, head first, feet first, whatever, into it. And so I actually at that time had started taking a course on SEO copywriting because the internet I was seeing was going to be a huge deal. And I really liked the idea of kind of using both sides of my brain, the logical part to figure out what keywords people were going to use to find a website online, and then the creative side to actually write it in a way that's interesting and not spammy. And
Mm.
so that's when I started my business. And slowly was growing that, but it was tough because, especially at the beginning, because I realized, number one, that I had to now be a salesperson,
Mhm.
and I had to talk to people, and I was still a bit shy. And not to mention, we were in this new community that I didn't know as many people anymore, and so I was having to meet people, and starting this new business, and it was a bit of a challenge, learning how to do the elevator pitch and all this stuff. Um, But interestingly enough, I think partway in, I started, video marketing was starting to become big, and so I started doing not only videos but also live presentations because I thought it would be a good way to demonstrate my expertise to get business. And I actually liked that. So even though I was, still the shy person, put me in front of a camera and I started really digging it. Even though when I worked in television before, I never wanted to be on camera. I was quite content to be behind the scenes. But now I realize that, well, if you want clients, you're going to have to talk to people.
Yeah.
So I
Mhm.
had to get over that side of me.
That fear of rejection, right? That's every
Yeah. Oh,
salesperson's worst.
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So you got your business going, it's successful, things are going the way you want them to go. You're feeling good. You're in front of the camera now, um, and then cancer creeps in somewhere in that story. What? Fill us in
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah. So in 2015, I was in the middle of actually working on doing some video marketing, and then was taking some courses in that and adding that into my business. And I got a call from my sister. She was in a lot of pain and things. She didn't know what was going on, and finally went to see her doctor. And it turned out that at first they thought it was going to be ovarian cancer, which would have been the good news. But unfortunately, when they went in, they found it was something else. It was called rhabdomyosarcoma, which was it's a cancer of the soft tissue, and she had a huge tumor that was lodged in her psoas muscle near her leg.
Mm.
And unfortunately, it was too big for the surgeon to be able to take out because it was wrapped around all these arteries, and it was going to be too big a risk for her. So they, recommended radiation and chemotherapy. But at the same time, they also did say it was stage 4. So even though I
Mhm.
think both she and I were in a bit of a denial about that, we didn't really hear that part, I think, too well for a little while, because it was serious, and she
Yeah.
did not have a good prognosis. And it's interesting. I'd recorded our first conversations of the consultation, and I listened back to it, and it's like, yeah, he clearly said that there was not like a good outcome. That
Mhm.
there's not a very good chance for a good outcome here at all. Um, and that just really certainly knocked my sister for a loop, but also me, because we weren't close when I was a kid, but as adults, we had started to, really develop a good relationship. And, the prospect of losing her when she was only in her 60s or early 60s was something, neither one of us wanted to have happen. And looking back now, the one good thing that came of it was the fact that we did spend a lot of time together, because she lived in Arizona, I lived in Florida, so I would try to fly out there as often as I could to help her when she would go through chemo,
Mhm.
and to deal with that, because is anybody who has ever either experienced cancer or know someone who does, chemo not only kills the cancer cells, it also kills off your good cells, and
Yeah.
it really, makes you a risk of infection, and just makes you really weak and sick. And unfortunately for her, she was like an outlier in everything. Her cancer was a pediatric cancer, for one thing,
Oh, wow.
and then she didn't respond well to some of the traditional chemo treatments, so they had to try some other ones, and then yeah, so everything was like so much more challenging for her, and I kind of lost my train of thought where I was going with it. But anyway, suffice to say that, um, oh, I know, is that she found it, and when finally she just found it harder and harder. Her body was just taking longer and longer to come back, and since the prognosis wasn't good anyway in 2016, she finally said, enough is enough. I'm not going to do any more chemo.
Mm.
And so I lost her at the end of 2016. Actually, the same day that Carrie Fisher died was the same day my sister, I lost her, because I was actually going through the computer and saw that news. However, there was another good thing that came of it, because 2 months before she passed, I was meditating, had been meditating for years. And during this morning meditation, this idea popped into my head that said, you should write a book about love. And I went, where is this coming from? I do marketing. I talk about social media. What do I know about love?
But you were a writer in one aspect of, although you weren't writing a story.
Yeah.
How many years had passed between when your brother passed away and your sister? Had it been quite a while?
Yeah, because he died in 81. So it was, good Lord, my goodness, like, yeah, about 35 years or so. So yeah, okay. It was a long time that he'd been gone. And yeah, she missed him, because he really was her big brother. Yeah. He was her protector and stuff. And so yeah, so and then we both, our parents, we'd lost both parents along the way to my dad. Shortly after I got married, he lost him, and then my mom, she died in 2003. So it was really just me and my sister for that next decade or so. And yeah, and I wish we had lived closer. And I know she would. She used to come visit when my kids were little. She would come like every year, for holidays and stuff. But eventually it was like, kids got older. She's like, Gloria, you need to come see me now.
Yeah,
yeah, I know. So I did start, but yeah.
Well, let's talk about the book. Go ahead and tell us about the book.
Yeah. So this idea to write a book about love, which was interesting, was that love was an acronym. And again, this like came to me that first day, but I didn't really explore it until later. But it stood for love, or the L in love was let go and let God. The O is open your heart to receive. The V was value your uniqueness. And the E was embrace your divinity. And I mean, I look back at it now, and it's like I'm still just like blown away because of this gift, which also, as I, in grieving my sister first off, and I didn't even touch this book for about 2 years after I got this idea. And at one point I was working with a coach, and as I was starting to write it and talking about what these concepts meant, I mean, I just had this huge breakthrough, because I realized the book was for me. It wasn't so much that I was writing this for other people. I needed to learn all these lessons for myself, because I didn't love myself. I didn't trust myself very well. I didn't value my worth. I mean, that's why I wasn't really as successful. I sort of put on this facade of being successful in the realm of online marketing, but I was still doing most everything myself, and not charging the types of fees for my services that other people with even probably less experience than I had were doing. And because I didn't value what I had, the experience that I had, the knowledge that I had. So writing that book was learning how to do that, how to let go of these, limiting beliefs that I'm not worthy, and let the universe direct my life, and start really opening my heart to not only receive guidance, but also to receive help, even from other people. So I talk about that in the book, and I talk about valuing yourself. And my sister, was the same way, because I share one of the stories in the book about, she called me one Christmas. She was a massage therapist, and she called me for advice, because she said one of her clients wanted to give her $1,000 holiday bonus. Wow. And she's like, Laura, I don't think I can accept that. What do you think? And I was like, holy smokes, somebody want to give me $1,000 bonus. I'd be like, yes, thank you. but maybe not, for thinking about it
Right.
now. But at the time I was like, yeah, I was like, you've been doing good work for her, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. And she brings me, referrals, and she's gotten pain relief. And so I'm like, yeah, you need to accept it, because otherwise you're hurting her feelings. And actually, because this is how she wants to be able to show you how much she cares. So, so yeah, so those are the kind of things that I talk about in the book. And I finally got it done last year, finally got it published, and the timing, it all worked out. It's like it all was divine timing why it had to work out, because my sister's birthday was February 21st. And as I'm writing this last year and finishing it up towards the end of the year, I'm like, I went to talk to my publisher. I'm like, can I get it? Can we publish it on February 21st? Because it would be 2/21/21.
Oh,
And I
wow.
just loved that's synchronicity or whatever of the
Yeah.
numbers to come out. So this was the perfect time for it to be released.
Your story is such an inspiration because, as a child, you grew up in a dysfunctional environment. You had
Yeah.
a mom that was loving, but yet could be mean, for
Yeah.
lack
Yeah.
of a better word. You had
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
you had a father that, it sounds like, while I think he was loving, he was distant because of the
Hmm.
alcoholism.
Yeah.
Your brother's passes away. You're trying to figure out who you are, and you're coming together. Um, and then, you got married, you started your business, you had kids. So there was like this growth that occurred. A lot of times I think people that grow up in environments like that, especially when they get uncomfortable, um, and they close up into their shell, they don't come out. And you progressively you were able to step out of your childhood environment. You didn't let yourself become a product of that environment. You went on to do things, that you felt moved to do. But then there's other aspects to your life too. And you talk about running a Walt Disney World Marathon. I mean, so these are just things that you're growing with. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Oh yes, that's all right. In fact, I'm actually staring at some of my medals that I have hanging up. Yeah, that was a crazy thing. So, I did dance as a kid, but I did not consider myself athletic, for one thing. I was always, picked last in gym class. Was not athletically coordinated, so I was not a runner by any stretch of the means. But a year after my mom passed, I got a letter in the mail from the American Heart Association, and they were doing this train to end stroke program.
Mhm.
And so they would run the Disney World Marathon, you raise money for this program. And I thought, well, this would be a good way to honor my mom, because she did have heart disease and
Yeah.
stuff. And I was like, so I'm in my mid 40s. I'm like, why not? And do I sign up for the half marathon? No. I signed up for the full marathon like a crazy person. And it's like, oh my God, because you have to do like 20 miles, I think, is the longest training run, just to be able to do that extra 26.2.
Yeah.
Um, I did this, and I wound up doing running walk combination. But when I got to Disney and to do this marathon, this was back in the early 2000s, when they would do the full and the half marathon on the same day.
Mm.
And I made a rookie mistake, and I got pulled off. I like heard this motor behind me, and I turn around, and there's this van, and he's like, "You can't finish the race. You got to get in." And I'm like,
Oh,
"What?" I mean, like, I still had 13 miles to go or something. I was only about halfway through, and he's like, "Nah, you're not going to finish in time. You're too slow." I'm like, "Oh man," I was like so pissed. But I realized that if you're ever going to do a marathon, do not use the porta potty at the beginning of the race, mile 1. No, you wait and go like mile 7 or something,
okay.
where the lines are much shorter, because I wasted too much time.
Mm.
But there's like this part of me, though, that is like, I am not a quitter. I don't like being told I can't do something. And so I said, okay, you know what? screw it. I'm going to come back next year and I'm going to finish this darn thing. I didn't do all this training not to do the whole
Right.
26.2 miles. And so this time I signed up with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, their program to run a marathon. And so to raise funds for that organization. And so I did it. And this time I did cross the finish line. It took me 7+ hours to do it. I'm not a fast runner, but I did it. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then crazily enough, I actually did it again, probably about, I don't know, 8 years later, maybe 8 or 10 years later, because a childhood friend of my daughter's was diagnosed with leukemia while she was in college. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it again. I'm going to raise money in Rachel's honor. And I did. And my sister laughed about this so much afterwards because I called her on the phone and she saved this message on her answering machine. I think I saved it, I think too, because I told her, I said, if you ever hear me say that I'm going to run a marathon, you talk me out of it. Do not let me do it. Because again, it took me well over 7 hours, especially because I caught a cold like the week before. So I was having trouble breathing, but thankfully I had a friend with me on this time and she kept me going. She encouraged me and I got to finish it. But it's like, no, never again. Half marathons, much more doable. 3 hours, 3.5 hours, I can do that. But 7, no, it's too much.
And somewhere in this story, your daughter's in Budapest, and you decide you're going to learn a language too. So you taught yourself Hungarian, or you
Yeah,
took a course, or
I'm teaching myself Hungarian. Yeah. My grandparents were from Hungary. Although I guess where my grandmother was born is actually part of the Ukraine now. But my daughter is a web designer, and she decided that she wanted to spend actually 2020 traveling through Europe. And when she found out that she could get Hungarian citizenship because her grandparents were born in Hungary, she decided to apply because she thought it would be easier to get a Euro passport. It'd be easier for her to get around. And so she studied Hungarian. And I had heard it growing up. My mother did speak it with my grandmother, but I never learned. I learned like Kislanya, which meant little girl. That was like one phrase that stuck in my head. And, Köszönöm szépen, which is thank you very much. And so then last October, my daughter had started the trip, came home because of COVID. Then she went back over in October, and so now she's there, and she's got a boyfriend, doing very well, very happy. But she left me all her books, and but I'm still just using Duolingo. But I'm like, you know what? I want to learn to do it. They say as you get older, it's good to keep learning stuff. I don't want to ever have Alzheimer's, so if I can keep challenging my brain, I will do that. And I'm doing good. I don't know that I can still speak it great, but I can definitely read it and understand it now, which is good. And yeah, it's a cool challenge. I love challenging myself to do new things. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? And
right.
I
You
want
gotta
to live
keep
a
growing.
very long time.
So we've got a few more minutes left, and I want to make sure that people listening, that your story is resonating with them, and they want to learn more about you. They want to, so you've got the book. It's Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself, and that's available on Amazon.
It is,
So they can
absolutely.
find it out on Amazon. And what else you got going on? Social media, websites?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. You can go to my website, gloriarand.com, and you can learn about all the stuff that I do. Like I said, I've got copywriting, I do coaching now as well. And I've on social media, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm actually starting to spend more time on LinkedIn now because I've been ignoring it for a little while, and I'm going to go back to that because it is a good place for where, in particular, I want to work with and service providers and consultants, and that's where they hang out too, as much as Facebook. So you can look me up there at Gloria Grace Rand.
Okay. And your coaching, the coaching you're doing, is there a specific audience that you've geared your coaching practice towards?
Yeah, In particular, I would love to connect with women entrepreneurs. In fact, women entrepreneurs who are going through some kind of loss, or something has rocked their confidence. In particular, whether it's divorce, or maybe they've had to, maybe even their business last year, and maybe they're still not quite sure that they're happy doing what they're doing. I can really relate to that because I've done all those things, and I've come out the other side, and I feel much more confident in my own skin now than I've ever had. I mean, probably not since I was a little kid, dancing on the stage. So I want to be able to help more women in particular really appreciate who they are, that you are worthy just by being alive, and you deserve to have all the love, joy, and abundance you can get.
Well, your story is definitely definitely an inspiration to anybody that thinks, I used to say in my younger days that I was a product of my environment, and I used that as an excuse as to why I wasn't where I wanted to be. And you've never, from what I know of you and the conversations we had, you've never tried to find an excuse. You found a way to overcome, to climb that Everest, as I like to say, and do the things that you've really wanted to do and have a full life. So I think there's a lot to be learned from your story, and I definitely hope it's helping, at least one person that's listening to this, hopefully many more.
I hope so. Yes, that would mean a lot to me. And yeah, and if you even just want to talk, I am available. I'm a good listener, and I'd be, let's just have a chat. It doesn't have to be business related, whatever. You can never have too many friends in this world, and I would, happy to meet new people. So let's connect.
So as we close here, I do like to ask this question as well of my guests: is if you could leave our listeners here today with words of wisdom, one final thought, what would you like to leave our audience with?
Actually, this is funny. This is perfect, actually, because I just saw this. I have this little fortune cookie,
Yeah.
message that I saved, and I know why I saved it, because this is what it says, and this is what I'm going to leave you with. It says, "Love yourself first, and everything falls into line."
That's
Isn't
wonderful.
that perfect?
That is. Love yourself first, and everything else falls in line.
Yeah.
Well, Gloria, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story. And let's keep in touch. I'd like to see how things evolve for you from here too.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do that. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful, gracious host and interviewer, and I had a really good time talking with you today.
Great. Don't go anywhere. I get to the perks of being a host is I get to have a little conversation with you off the air. Okay. So hang tight. And all right. Bye now.
Bye.